Good evening and welcome to Left, Right and Centre. Poll trouble in Kolkata as the Trinamool Congress sat on a dharna outside the State Election Commission demanding that counting continue as scheduled on the 7th of October. This in spite of the fact that opposition complaints of rigging and booth capturing have poured in. In fact, nearly 20 journalists were beaten up during the poll process over the weekend. The opposition has attacked Mamata Banerjee's government for the violence. Her critics call it an absence of democracy. The civic polls are being seen as a curtain raiser to assembly elections due next year, and the stakes are high. Also on the show tonight, the most powerful woman in the world, German Chancellor Angela Merkel, was in Delhi on a state visit from returning a 10th century stolen artifact that found its way to Germany to an agreement with Kendriya Vidyalayas to teach German to a more critical massive package for solar energy aimed to combat climate change. Was this visit a success? How does it reflect on India's ties with Germany? But first, of course, before we go to those big topics of today, on Friday, NDTV had reported on a 14-year-old 10th class student who killed himself in the Karimnagar district of Telangana after he was humiliated for not paying his school fees. Now, a 17-year-old has jumped off the 3rd floor of a private junior college near Hyderabad, unable to cope with financial and academic pressure. Uma Sudhir met with a survivor who says he has big dreams that were broken by the pressures he faced.
Broken bones and dreams. This 17-year-old jumped off the 3rd floor of a private junior college on the outskirts of Hyderabad. Unable to take the pressure of not having paid fee dues and also of academic performance. Both his legs and back are fractured.
Every time they will scold us to pay the fee and they harass us to pay the fee and getting marks. If we don't get the marks, they will harass us.
The son of a driver from Warangal, his father sold land and borrowed from relatives so the son could get into an engineering college.
I also have some dreams. I have to become an IITian.
Yeah.
But so many pressures.
The police have booked a case of harassment under the Juvenile Justice Act against the college management. Big dreams and little ability to cope with stress. On the one hand, parents who put tremendous pressure on children to achieve success. On the other, corporate schools and colleges who convert students into mark-making machines and themselves mint money. In Hyderabad with camera person Nagraju, Uma Sudhir, NDTV.
Right, well, to talk about the kind of pressure students face, we're being joined in the studio by Isidore Philip. Thank you so much for being with us. You work a lot with child rights and especially children who are facing this kind of pressure. We're talking not only of academic pressure from the parents, from the school or ragging, very specifically of the kind of financial pressure some of these students face. Just shed some light on what that's about.
I think what's happening, Maya, over a period of time, the commercialization of education has gone to such a point where education just means business. One, I think the governments over a period of time have lost control on what we would like to give in the name of education, both in schools and colleges. Two, once we allowed it to let go, we have no control, no regulation, be it in finance, be it also in what we are delivering in the name of education. So education and pressure seems to be going together. And I think that is the tragedy today.
So for NGOs like yours who are working with these issues, where is your point of redressal for stresses like this?
One, there are no redressal, but in Telangana, there is now, we have actually got the government to move towards to have a helpline for children in schools, where actually they can call in and then talk about fees, talking about issues that they face within the schools. And I think what we require right now across the country is a redressal mechanism, where students and parents can call in confidentially to say, you know, this is what is happening in my school. And I think we cannot take this anymore. In the name of education, pressure cannot be pushed in. And I think here children are going in for development, but except that, everything else seems to be happening.
In your experience, are there particular areas where things like this are worse than others? Because we've seen, and I'm going to separate this again. One we talk about academic pressure, whether it's from parents, whether it's from peers. The other is a kind of emotional pressure where you're ragged and you don't know how to deal with that. You don't fit in with your classmates, whatever it might be. this is an entirely different area where actually the student has no control.
I think let's look at education itself. What is education supposed to do? We say it draws out the best in a child. Innate potential, it's there, we draw it out from the child. If you're drawing it out from the child, where is the pressure supposed to be? The child doesn't know how to cope.
Right.
What does that reflect on? That means we as a system have failed in actually bringing 1, 2, 3 skill set in the child. The skills cannot come from outside. 10 years, 12 years of schooling, if it doesn't prepare you to live life, that means we as a schooling system have failed in delivering or making the child what the child is supposed to be.
So, critically, I think the one thing that jumps out at me, apart from redressal mechanisms that involve authorities of power, whether it's the state, whether it's the center, whether it's ministries, things like that, we're looking at something as fundamental as providing good counselors in schools. Is that happening?
Good counselors, yes, Maya. Good counselors are not there. But one very important thing, let's also not just put it on the counselor and say, I will give you a shoddy system, I will give you a horrible textbook. This is a system that I will give. In the name of evaluation system, I will conduct examinations that I like and I will evaluate it any way I like. Go to a counselor. And I think that is not the only solution. Yes, counselors need to be in every school. But I think we need to change the way we deliver education today.
But I think the question I'm asking is, when changing the way education is delivered is one part of the story. But because, in a sense, the kind of spaces that these children inhabit, the homes that they live in, something like going to a psychologist or some kind of a counselor is not even an option. It's not even something they consider. Do you think that that is something that actually, you know, they should be more involved with?
You look at Childline, 1098 statistics across the country. Lot of calls in Childline are basically for emotional support and guidance in chat.
Yeah.
What does that reflect? It reflects that our children have an immense desire to talk to somebody and they do not find anybody to talk to.
Yeah,
so they're using 1098 as an anonymous ways by which they can actually talk to somebody.
So we wish some of these children had also considered doing that rather than take these extreme steps. Because
it's easier said than done.
It's easier said than done. Exactly. But thank you all. Thank you so much, Israfil, for joining us on this, and our prayers with the family of that young boy in Hyderabad as well. Let's move on now to other news from West Bengal. In Kolkata, a political cliffhanger in the making. The Trinamool on dharna outside the office of the State Election Commission to demand the counting of civic poll results on the 7th as scheduled, as we said, but they virtually issued a threat after a 4-hour meeting with the commissioner. Count or else. This because there's been severe complaints by the opposition of booth rigging and poll malpractice against the Trinamool Congress. In fact, nearly 20 journalists were attacked during the polling over the weekend.
Led by the mayor of Kolkata, Trinamool protests outside the office of the State Election Commission. Sunday evening, the commission put off counting of votes cast on Saturday in civic polls after opposition allegations of rigging and booth capturing by Trinamool-backed outsiders. The Election Commission says it has put off counting for time to examine footage from CCTV and webcams inside polling booths and footage of violence, alleged rigging, booth capturing by the media. But Trinamool says the whole thing is a conspiracy, spearheaded by the governor.
Finally, the BJP have found a new leader to lead them into the 2016 assembly elections in Bengal, and that leader now lives in Raj Bhavan.
But it was to the governor that the left and BJP went today. Putting off counting is not enough. Fresh polls should be called, they said. Youth Congress also on the streets.
देखिए पूरा चुनाव को रद्द करना चाहिए, नया ढंग से चुनाव होना चाहिए और सेंट्रल फोर्स तैनात करके जनता वोट डाल पाए ऐसा रूप से चुनाव होना चाहिए.
Meanwhile, journalists on a protest march. At least 20 media persons were injured in Salt Lake. Civil society also voicing concern. Saturday's pictures from Salt Lake. Voters thrashed, bombs hurled. Will fresh polls be called? As the cliffhanger unfolds, the bugle has been sounded for Assembly Polls 2016. In Kolkata, with Nirmal Sarkar and GD Shankar, Mamata Banerjee, NDTV.
Well, to talk about what's happened in Kolkata and the outcome it may have, the fallout it may have on the poll results, we're being joined from Kolkata from the Trinamool Congress by Saugata Roy, the Lok Sabha MP, from the CPM, Mohammad Salim, Lok Sabha MP and Politburo member, from Kolkata, from the BJP, Krishnu Mitra is joining us from the state media convener, and in the studio, Aarti Jaira. Thanks very much to hopefully bring some sanity into the proceedings, which is what we always rely on you for. Saugata Roy, I want to actually start by asking you, the charges are that the violence was instigated by the Trinamool. Now, we've seen Derek O'Brien's statement on this, but give us a sense of why people are saying that there were Trinamool supporters who were responsible for this violence and the Chief Minister and the state machinery turned the other cheek.
The Chief Minister of the state machinery had nothing to do with the violence. As you know, on days of election, as was the case here, the whole police machinery goes into the hands of the State Election Commission. So it was the job of the State Election Commission to control violence both outside the polling booths and the inside the polling booth. The police were to listen to their orders. So if there has been violence, non-prevention of it is the fault of the State Election Commission. Still, we do not support any violence that may have taken place. We condemn the attack on the journalist, and as you may know, the police has already acted on 2 people who were identified in the violence on the journalists. Now, but the State Election Commission has gone ahead and postponed the counting for all polls. We see this as a conspiracy because this was the opinion expressed by the Governor of West Bengal, and this was what was relayed to the media after the state BJP president came out after meeting the State Election Commissioner. Now, we wonder how is it that what decision the State Election Commissioner ultimately announced was ventilated by the BJP president earlier. We suspect that there is some secret linkage between the BJP, the governor and the State Election Commission. You must realize that all these people who are crying horse, they have no strength. Whenever results come out, you will see that Trinamool Congress will win all the elections in the 3 corporations where elections were held, hands down.
Okay, all right, Mohammad Salim. I want Mohammad Salim to respond to that. Okay,
have no strength at all.
All right, Saugata Roy, Mohammad Salim, respond.
It's very unfortunate that a gentleman like Professor Saugata Basu also, Saugata Roy, is joining the ranks of the Trinamool Congress goons and trying to protect what the ministers of the Trinamool Congress for last 2-3 days is trying to. First, they are on a denial mode that nothing has happened, and then they were trying to shift the blame on the CPIM, and now this conspiracy theory. Actually, there was no election that has taken place. Your correspondent also must have reported this. All the cameras and the journalists and the citizens who have witnessed this violence, they are also protesting. That's why the camera were broken. That's why the cameramen were attacked, because Mamata Banerjee's kind of politics is this: you do the crime, but don't leave any signs. And that's why it's a criminal psychology. So Trinamool Congress is now a bunch of criminals, and they did whatever they wanted to do, mobilizing outsiders, led by the MLAs and Trinamool leaders. Police were rendered idle, just silent spectators. Election Commission also could not do anything, miserably failed. No election took place, and now goons have upper hand because the journalists were reporting and the cameramans were photographing. That's why they were attacked, to destroy any evidence. But despite that, I must salute to the journalists, even risking their lives, they have reported. That's why whole country is coming to know what kind of politics Saugata Roy is practicing what kind of politics Trinamool is doing, how the goons were taken and having a field day under Mamata Banerjee's regime. And that's why you want entire cancellation of the electoral process. There's not an election, it's a farce.
All right, so I want to ask the BJP, because is this going to be a case of where, you know, my enemy's enemy is my friend?
Elections are just a moment,
just a moment. I want to bring the BJP into this first.
Salim, better gear up your own organization.
I want to just bring the BJP into this. Mr. Mitra, the Derek O'Brien of the Trinamool Congress has posted on Facebook, and I'm going to quote from there. He says that the BJP has finally found its leader in West Bengal and its face of the 2016 assembly election. The active politician is none other than the governor. And how do you react to this?
No, actually, now the CPMization of the TMC is now complete. This is the same manner in which the CPM used to attack the authorities of the constitution in the state, like the Chief Justice and the Governor.
So great now advocate for Mamata Banerjee's politics.
CPMization is complete, and that's why I don't think it fit to reply to the distasteful comments of Derek O'Brien. As far as the BJP is concerned, we are with the people of West Bengal and people of Salt Lake and Rajarhat who have witnessed a farce. And along with them, we demand that this farce election be cancelled altogether, and a new election date is announced, and in which central forces are to be deployed for this fresh election, which we hope should be free and fair.
So as I said, okay, the enemy's enemy is my friend. You and the CPM making the same demand of these polls sort of being nullified. Saugata Roy, the counting may have been postponed, but ultimately go ahead. It comes back to the same thing.
No, counting has been postponed. The State Election Commissioner has said that he will look into all the footage. But I find
the charges are against the Trinamool specifically.
His actions totally inept. Because if he had any complaints on the day of the election, he could have cancelled the election to some booths and ordered repolling, as the Central Election Commission does. On the day of the election, the State Election Commissioner said that he had not received any complaints of large scale.
He had put an inept person as the State Election Commissioner. Handpicked. Inept.
Can I ask Saugata one question?
The BJP delegation, and then he changes his
view. EC ordered Babul Supriyo, who is not a voter in Asansol, to pack his bag and get out of the Asansol area, whereas TMC MLAs and MPs who are not voter of Salt Lake were unnecessarily
during the BJP for their rescue.
Mohammed Salim, Mr. Mitra and Saugata Roy, just a moment, gentlemen. Let's bring Aarti Jarat into this. Aarti, many people are saying this is like a make or break
election. Come to Salt Lake and Rajarhat.
One moment, gentlemen.
Only the BJP is competing with flags and posters with the TMC. There is no CPM, there is no Congress.
All right, Mr. Mitra, we have Aarti Jarat waiting in the studio.
A few days back, what you termed as the district possession of the left front was led by all state leaders of the left.
Mr. Mitra,
there was
one moment.
So it proves that the left stands decimated in West Bengal, and there is only BJP, which is as the opposition force.
We're going to have to turn down your microphone if you don't let others speak.
No Didi now.
All right. Aarti Jarat, we're going to kill that mic until they settle down over there. Aarti Jarat, I want to ask you, this is a make or break election for the Trinamool Congress because they're being seen as a curtain raiser, as a precursor to the assembly polls, but the allegations of this kind of hooliganism against Trinamool are not new.
Absolutely. If you remember when the civic polls were held for Kolkata and some other places in April this year, we had similar kind of allegations. But Maya, this time I think the violence has been much more, because it's not just between party workers, but as you've seen, journalists were attacked. Right, so it went beyond, the boundaries that are usually, that we usually see. And I think, listen, if the election commissioner wants to press the pause button and have a look at, what the violence was, how bad it was, and whether there was actually large-scale rigging and so on. I mean, I think he has every right to do so. And if the Trinamool is so confident of winning, I mean, how does it matter if the results come out a few days later? I mean, the fact is that with every election, we're seeing levels of violence increasing. And I think that's a really disturbing trend. And it's not just in elections. Look at the state of the universities in Bengal. Jadavpur University, Calcutta University, you know, they've all been in turmoil. So, I mean, there seems to be a latent violence which is, you know, kind of bursting out. And I think that's a really worrying trend in Bengal.
So, in your view, because you have three parties all in opposition to each other, really, on the political stage as far as the state is concerned, where is it going to go from here? Because if they're not able to come together on this basic issue, we're not going to see any stemming of this kind of hooliganism.
Absolutely. I really don't know what. And you know, the funny thing is that Mamata spent her entire political career fighting the so-called hooliganism and gundagardi of the CPM, you know. And it's really funny that the, you know, boot is on the other foot now.